Hi, welcome to the Soulful Screenwriting Podcast. It's 2024, y'all, and we're gonna dive in with today's topic because more than anything, what I want you to know about screenwriting is that screenwriting starts with daydreaming, and I spent years being trained so thoroughly and formally as a screenwriter. I got an MFA from the University of Southern California in screenwriting. Very, very great, amazing, renowned screenwriting program. But nobody has ever talked about this enough. And 3 years ago, when I started teaching screenwriting online during kind of the height of the pandemic, I was like, let's see if we can make screenwriting accessible to people in a way where it can be a joy-centric process and it doesn't have to be with so much strain, because the MFA program I went to was awesome, but like everyone was burnt out by the end. And I was like, this feels like not a sustainable creative process. And so this idea kind of took root, and I just became a little obsessed with the idea of like, what is all that you need for a screenwriting process to really just be exactly what it needs to be and nothing else. Like none of the other stress and stuff we think it has to be, because so many times artists feel guilty for making art. Like we're like, well, no, I make art, but don't worry, I suffer and I'm miserable like at least half the time. And that just hurts the art and nobody else cares. But like it makes us feel better because we just feel guilty. We feel guilty pursuing joy, and we feel guilty prioritizing self-expression over people-pleasing. But we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to people-please in 2024. We're going to self-please. And there's nothing selfish about it because we're going to be able to turn our experiences into stories and art and just moments that make people happy just because we're radiating that joy. Excuse me. I have an itty-bitty sinus infection going on, so if there's like an echo in my nasal cavity you're hearing, that's what it is. I assume you're here because you would like to write a script, or you're wondering if writing a script is something you could do. If that's the case, I'm so happy you're here because yes, you can absolutely write a script. The desire to write a script is like the most pure form of fuel, and I don't care like what other training you've had, like it's just all the reasons that you think are there that mean you can't write a script. They're just fear. It's just your fear. I'm so happy you're here because what I want you to know is screenwriting can be so much more easeful than you think, than we think, than people are told. In fact, I believe the more easeful you let your screenwriting process be, the more impactful the result. Because when I go softly into a screenwriting project, from ideation to daydreaming to putting it on the page, like the softer I go in, the more I'm embracing my authenticity and just what is about me and not what I think should be. And that kind of nuance makes a big difference when you're working on a story that you're going to spend months, if not like a year or years on. It's just like that kind of touchstone, that compass pointing kind of always to your essence. This is why I love talking about daydreaming. This is why I love encouraging anyone who is interested in screenwriting to try it, because I actually find that people who have less screenwriting training are able to develop a sustainable screenwriting process more quickly because they don't have all this resistance to like letting it be easeful. Because like in my MFA program at USC that I did, like there was such a kind of culture around like efforting and putting effort into it and having a thick skin. But that's like the definition of like a hard way in, not like a soft way in. The version of a story that you think you're supposed to write to please someone else is boring. The not boring version of that story is the one you write because it just lights you up. And that's why we're going to talk about daydreaming, because daydreaming is something that no one had to teach us. It just came from our essence. I remember the first like movie story I ever worked on was in second grade, and I became obsessed with the movie Flubber because I have always had a crush on Robin Williams. No apologies about that. And I loved Flubber, and I in particular loved the storyline between Robin Williams' character and he's like a science kind of professor, inventor. And then he had this flying robot assistant named Weibo, who was like this female kind of voice, and she was in love with Robin Williams, like I was. And so I connected with this character. And in second grade, during the silent sustained reading, whatever period of 20 minutes, where I'm sure it was just there to give our second grade teacher a break, but I remember reading my book, quote unquote, reading my book, holding it open and just spending those 20 minutes just daydreaming and imagining what like Flubber 2 could be about, and how like Weibo would be a more like central character, because I don't know, I just love this like robot, like what makes someone human, and like does love make someone, just I love fantasy elements. It spoke to me. And that's like, you're not going to decide what your voice is. You're going to reveal what your voice is by just being open, and being open to let those visions in your head flow onto the page. So when I started teaching screenwriting with a focus on a joy-centric, sustainable, easeful process, I remembered that experience in second grade, and I was just really like struck by the memory of how much I enjoyed the process of daydreaming about Flubber 2. Because at the time I started teaching, I was so burnt out. I didn't even remember how to enjoy being excited about a script idea. And I really wanted to help other people connect with like a joy-centric process. And I was hoping that I could also heal my own relationship with writing. And that experience in second grade, I just started to try to recreate that as an adult in my early 30s. And it was awkward at first. Like when you start daydreaming on purpose as an adult, like the self-conscious thoughts are going to come in. You're going to feel guilty, like you're not working hard enough. Like if anyone saw you, they wouldn't believe that you're working on a script or writing. But I persisted with it, and I experimented with different things, and I really found what kind of made daydreaming easier for me as an adult who daydreaming had been trained out of decades ago. But like my body could still remember how to do it, and like it's just like a muscle. And so I like started strengthening and kind of nurturing this like daydreaming impulse and instinct and muscle, and the rewards were so great. And I got my students to do it, and we just collectively learned so much about like how easeful a screenwriting process can be. And then this was what was so beautiful, was it just worked. Like this script that I wrote while I was teaching is, I believe, just like the best thing I've ever written, because it's just so me. And I just like took risks, because it all started from this private daydreaming place where I just was my first audience. I was just creating a movie in my mind for me that made me happy. You like feel your way through it. You feel your way into a story. And that is such a powerful way to start a script. So that's what I would love for you to take away from this. And like my favorite screenwriters also talk about this. Like I love the way Phoebe Waller-Bridge talks about screenwriting from this very just kind of like self-embracing open place, easeful, just kind of like not fighting against what your body wants to do, the time at which you want to write, even if it's in the middle of the night. But this quote that I love, that I stumbled on like 10 years ago from Craig Mazin, you might know him from creating the HBO miniseries Chernobyl. But I remember Craig Mazin said on his podcast, Script Notes, he goes, screenwriting is just structured daydreaming. It's daydreaming on purpose. And I loved that. Like, it's just not talked about enough. So that's why we're going to talk about it some more. But yeah, you writing a script can truly be as simple as you setting an intention to daydream about a story regularly. And it doesn't have to be like consistently, just like persistently with some regularity. You're like, I'm going to keep daydreaming about this. My favorite part about teaching people a screenwriting process that's easeful and sustainable, and their first way in is always daydreaming. My favorite part about it is it's so accessible to people in a lot of different life circumstances and situations, because it's daydreaming, because like all you need is your mind and some space. The thing about daydreaming is like you're letting it come to you, and you're just kind of like making yourself open to it. And then in that special moment where it's like you get a daydream and you have some space to like write something down, you just do it then. But yeah, if you want to write a script that is like vivid and just like captures your most authentic voice, like you've just got to try daydreaming your way into it. Okay, here's a definition of daydreaming that I found online that I liked. Daydreaming is the refocusing of attention from outward surroundings to one's inner thoughts and feelings. I'm going to read that again. Daydreaming is the refocusing of attention from outward surroundings to one's inner thoughts and feelings. Like another way of putting that is like you let an ache like become visions in your mind, like kind of cathartic visions. And I will give you an example. I recently started exploring this script idea that is like pretty out there. I've written quite a few out there scripts. Jesus comes up a lot in my scripts, and so does like sexuality. This script is no different, but it's even like more out there for me than usual. And I was like feeling really disconnected from screenwriting. It's been like a really kind of hard year and like personal life things and just not being able to prioritize like my writing as much. And so I was feeling just down about like how I was going to even start this script. I think I found like an old notebook and I was like, oh my God, daydreaming. It just works. But it's like you forget because your brain has such a hard time believing it could be so easy and accessible. So here are the tips I'm going to give you of like what makes it easier to daydream. 3 M's. These are mine. For me, motion, music, and movies really help me start daydreaming, or just like it helps fill my cup so that like when I'm kind of out and about, I can just like pour it out into these visions. I'll explain a little bit more. Okay. So like motion, going for a walk, going for a drive, like listening to music while you drive, listening to music while you go for a walk, or a bike ride, just like that can really help the daydreaming process. I find like daydreaming on purpose where it's like, I'm going to sit down and daydream. That never works for me. Never is a strong word, but like, it's like my artistic, whatever kind of, it's like the sensitivity of me as an artist, it like doesn't really respond well to that. But the sensitivity of me as an artist does really respond well to just like being allowed to like come hang out with me without this pressure. And so when I'm driving, or like when I'm driving my kiddo to preschool, or like I've dropped him off and I'm like, don't feel like going home yet. And so I like take an extra loop around the neighborhood and listen to some music. Like that's when some daydreaming comes in. And yeah, it's like, I mean, I think for this most recent script, I just had kind of like a vague idea that just kind of was like bothering me, like in a fun way, just like wouldn't leave me alone. And so I kind of just like set an intention, just like, I'm gonna see how I can maybe daydream about this script, like I have about past scripts. And just me saying that, like, invited in the muse or whatever from the universe. And visions started coming. So, okay, so we talked about motion and music and movies being really helpful. If I'm, like, super having a hard time daydreaming, just, like, absorbing someone else's daydream, like a movie, is so helpful. What I love about cinema, what I love about TV and film and animation and everything that is motion picture is like someone has created a dream for you. Like to me, screenwriting is creating a dream for another person to enjoy, sharing a dream you have in a way that someone else can see it too. And yeah, so like if I really feel kind of uninspired and like just drained, movies, just like following this weird intuition of like, I feel like watching Twilight and then I feel like watching like Spotlight, like totally different movies. But like, you just kind of follow that intuition of like, I feel like watching a vampire romance, or like, I feel like watching a, investigative journalist story. And like, you just let your intuition show you what it wants to be fed. And like your brain will start to take those elements and like recombine them. For those of you who are like, I don't want to watch a movie because I don't want to steal someone else's artwork, I get where you're coming from. I will say in my experience, that's been like a fear-based approach to creating, which has never been super fruitful for me. What I find to be much more fruitful is appreciating the work of other artists, being grateful that they're there, being grateful that they made movies for me, being grateful that they already explored these themes in a way that's just fun and easy for me to enjoy when I'm like sick or exhausted, and I can just fill my artistic cup. And then when my cup is more full, when I've watched like a bunch of movies and I'm like, have this little thing in my mind of curiosity of like, I wonder what it would be like if there was a vampire who was also an investigative journalist. It's just like your mind just combines those two. Like that's a brand new idea. You didn't steal anything. This is the tradition of artists. This is what makes an artist like always part of a community because like You can be in community with a dead artist who made, Shakespeare. I am best friends with Shakespeare in my mind. I love Shakespeare. And I love that, like, you can always take Shakespeare and, like, make your own version of it. You can always write Twelfth Night or take Romeo and Juliet and, like, recreate it, and it will be brand new. As my very first screenwriting teacher said, everything's already been written. Like, we were forbidden. We were forbidden from giving the feedback. Like, I just feel like this has been done before, because he's like, it's all been done. He's like, babies, what are you talking about? Like, it's all been done. Storytelling has been around forever. It's like, this is just the human experience, like, being expressed again and again. You don't need to worry about stealing someone else's idea, because the longer you spend with a project, the more you're going to pour your own essence into it. And something I would love to tell my students again and again, if only to just remind myself regularly of this truism, is that a story is impactful not because of its plot, but because of the point of view through which it's told. A story is not impactful because of its plot. It's impactful because of the point of view through which it's told. So, like, a plot is like, this happens, and this happens, and this happens. Point of view is like the way you write all of those moments, the way you're the only one who could have written it that way. And that's why tapping into daydreaming is this, like, jet fuel for your creative authenticity as a screenwriter, as any kind of writer or creative, because it's like daydreaming is tapping into, like, a point of view that is so closely tied to your essence, to the fact that there is no one else in the world exactly like you. And so no one else is going to have the exact same daydreams as you. So you capture that, you use that as your way into screenwriting, like, it will never steer you wrong. It might be kind of scary because you're like, I feel like I'm breaking rules. Like, I feel like this is too easy. But it's like, I just promise you, it's so worth it. And just as a side note about, like, the way I've seen the screenwriting industry kind of, like, naturally shift and change as, like, we moved over the last, like, 10, 20 years from like network shows and, like, cable shows to streaming. And there's just an explosion of so much more content than there used to be, because there's so many more platforms and places for movies, TV shows to be released. What I've seen is, like, this celebration of the specific point of view. Michaela Cole is one of my favorite creators, just in, like, in what she makes, but also in just the way she makes it, and in how she just, like, embraces her point of view so beautifully. Like, Michaela Cole did Chewing Gum, this TV show, which was so good, and you could feel her point of view in it and her personal experience. And then she made I May Destroy You, and it was just like her soul and point of view is just like, you're so much closer with that in I May Destroy You. And that's, to me, what I love about being an artist, is, like, getting closer and closer to, like, the richest, most, like, undiluted version of my point of view that is just like, this is not even just what I've been through. This is, like, the way I experience the world, like, in the deepest part of my being. And you put that on the page and you just, like, share it, it's going to find the people who are like, oh my God, I'm not the only one. And, like, that's what makes people love art. And what I love about, like, the streaming world and how much content there is like, there's just something for everyone now. And that's, like, it's a really cool time to be excited about screenwriting or interested in making a career of it, or of any kind of filmmaking, because, like, technology is on your side. I'm filming this YouTube video of my podcast on my phone, like, with a little stand I bought on Amazon for $10, like, sitting on top of, like, a Lego box that my son has. It's just like, you can make it now. You do not need anyone's permission. You do not need a green light from anyone else. Like, technology is on your side. It has never been cheaper. It has never been more available to you. You've got the internet. You can always distribute it. Like, these were things that filmmakers didn't have, like, just not too long ago. My first mentor, I remember, she was like, I took out a loan when she went to USC. She goes, I took out a loan to get a hard drive with 20 gigabytes. Like, she was just like, you have that on your phone now. Like, she was just like, it's ridiculous. There's so much available. Like, you are so much richer as a filmmaker than you even realize, because of the time you're currently living in. And if there's anything that I'd wish for people listening to this podcast, it's just being the person to remind them that like you don't need permission. Like I'd love to be the person to give you permission to not need permission or to not have to wait for permission anymore. And also just to give you like community and solidarity about like how you can do this. You can really do this. You can really forge your own path as a screenwriter, as a filmmaker, and you have everything you need to be a standout screenwriter right now because you have you. And it's really about embracing your you-ness. Yeah. Just from like a career advice point of view, it is a waste of time, in my opinion, to try and master all of the like forms of screenwriting because you feel if you do that, then you'll be worthy. No. You're worthy now, number one. Number two, nobody cares if you mastered all the other stuff because the only thing they care about, like the only thing a producer or someone interested in hiring you or bringing you into a writer's room, the only thing they care about is the richness of your point of view and you knowing what that point of view is and them needing that point of view, like in the TV writer's room or for this, script adaptation of some young adult novel they want to make. So you really leaning into your you-ness, you getting vulnerable and, writing romance stories about Jesus being queer, which is what I do right now. Like me embracing that's my X factor as a screenwriter. I want to be known as the screenwriter that has a specific specialty, and my specialty is writing empowering stories about humans like embracing their power by embracing their sexuality, by shedding the versions of themselves they thought they had to be in order to be loved so that they can just like be themselves. Like that's what I love to write because that's what I love to like heal in myself. And so I do that on the page and it's just powerful. It's just the most powerful thing I've ever written. When I was teaching and I wrote that first script, I was like, whoa, this is so bold. I was like, I can't imagine writing like a bolder script than this. And then I started working on this new story that is like a Jesus biopic. That's like a queer love story about Jesus. And I'm like, I cannot tell you how giddy I get when I talk about this script because I'm just like, it feels so good to me. And it aligns with like, I've had a coming out experience over the last year, realizing a couple things about myself, but the main headline being like, I'm not straight. And I just love Jesus. I joke that I have a sexual fixation on Jesus. I always will, always have a crush on Jesus. It makes sense. I went to Bible camp when I was 13 and like, they're like, Jesus cares about your feelings and you can always talk to him. And I'm like, I love Jesus. So hot. The hotness of a servant leader, sign me up. But yeah, like everything I've talked about, like the passion, the unapologetic, just the joy I feel, the curiosity I feel for my own kind of like just infatuations with Jesus. Like all of this is very compelling. Like, don't get me wrong. Most people will be like, oh, that's not for me. They'll be like, that's really fun, but that's not for me. But I'm not worried about those people. I'm interested in connecting with the person who is like, I am looking for the girl who wants to write a sexy love story about Jesus. Like, I'm looking for the girl who is obsessed with those themes of like, what is the cost of being your unapologetic self? What is the cost of connecting with your spirituality through more sexual freedom than you ever thought you were allowed? Like, what does healing look like through sensuality and spiritual freedom and just like, and the soul knew its worth. Like, that's what I love writing about. And I write like a lot of erotica, not on purpose. It's just what happens. It's just what I love. There's a Stephen King quote that I love where someone was like, in an interview was like, why do you think you write the things that you write? And he goes like, I think he was like talking about someone asking him this. And he goes like, I mean, they asked me like I had a choice. He's like, this is me. This is who I am. And I mean, Stephen King is so prolific because he loves writing. Like, he loves reading books and he loves writing them. And he writes what sparks joy from him. And if you write what sparks joy for you, it's not going to take you too long to figure out what your authentic voice is. I joke that the downside of writing authentically with a sustainable screenwriting process that's easeful is like, you don't get to pick what your authentic voices. I don't think like younger Linda 10 years ago would be like, sign me up to be the like sexual, erotic, like Jesus obsessed screenwriter. But in embracing those things about myself, that process has been the most freeing, like meaningful journey emotionally for me as an artist, for me as a human. And that's what we're here to do as artists. We're here to just like embrace the human experience and report back about what our rich inner world is like, so other people can go, oh my God, me too. I'm not alone. And you saying it this way makes me think of it this way. And it's just this like gift that keeps on giving and paying it forward. And that's what we're here to do. And that's why I named this podcast Soulful Screenwriting, because I'm like, this is what it's about. Like, we don't need to apologize for enjoying our art. We just don't. Okay, so we talked about movies and motion and music being amazing muses for daydreaming, great companions for daydreaming. Okay, and I'll kind of wrap this up because I want to leave you with just feeling like you're ready to go out there and just see what happens when you do this. But let's say like all you have is just the kernel of a script idea of like, you know, whatever, just like, maybe you don't even have words to it yet. It's just like, sometimes you close your eyes and you just like see this scene and you're like, it just feels like something's there. Or you have a curiosity about something, some like news story you read, but just like when you're relaxed, keep letting your mind like move that way. I find the easiest way to bridge daydreaming into like actually getting something written is by making the initial writings downs of whatever I'm daydreaming about as kind of like low pressure as possible. So I'm a huge fan of writing on my phone. I'm a huge fan of just like on my iPhone, opening the notes app, putting a headline at the top of the note that's just like script idea or script daydreams. My current one is just called Jesus Script. And just writing out kind of like what feels yummy, and just like bullet points. Use bullet points. Use the word maybe, like maybe this happens. Maybe this happens. I call it the maybe draft. The maybe draft is my favorite way to start an outline, and you'll be amazed at how it'll just naturally morph into an outline in like a couple weeks, a couple months, whenever it's like ready to move on to the next stage. We'll talk more about this, about just like how to keep transitioning from daydreaming into like writing on the page. Because I imagine if you were anything like I was like several years ago, you're like, but how do I make it into a script? Like I need it to be in a script yesterday. And I'm like, I get that urgency, but like trust the process. It's going to work. I'm going to guide you. Relax into it. Relax into your daydreams, because that is your connection to like source energy, creative jet fuel, your you-ness. Your X factor as a screenwriter is in your daydreams. So like know that even though it looks like you're doing nothing and someone's like, what are you doing? And they don't need to know, but we know that you're doing the most productive thing you can as a screenwriter, and you're making space for daydreams. You're making space for like the most potent scenes to come to you. So I like to just remember these two things for your process. This is what I want you to play with, is you're going to dream and validate. You're going to daydream and you're going to validate those daydreams. And you're going to do that by, maybe you just like open a notes app on your phone. You're like, in my case, like Jesus Script. And it's like, maybe this happens. And then that's all I write, just like a couple lines. And then I go off, I'm driving around, I'm listening to music. I start to see a scene and I'm daydreaming, and I let myself daydream, maybe for a couple days. Maybe if it's like, I just don't have the time to sit down and even open my notes app, maybe for a couple weeks. But then at some point I come back and I validate those daydreams. I just like write down kind of what keeps coming up, what I keep seeing in my notes app, and just keep doing that. Just keep dreaming and validating. And you're going to be amazed at how every time you dream and validate it, like the return just keeps coming back. Like you've just kept like making space. Like you create space for the daydream happens, you validate it, more daydreams come. So I want you to try that. I'm going to pause really quick because my puppy's mad. Hello, I'm back and I'm in a different room. This will only make sense to people watching the YouTube video of this podcast, which you can find on my YouTube channel. I'll put the information in the description. But I was starting to edit my podcast. Well, I had to take a break because I had puppies and then my kiddo arrived. And anyway, I was like, okay, I'll finish recording the podcast later. But as I was editing, I kind of noticed how I was like rushing towards the end. And I was like, oh, it's because like there's so much I want to say. So I have an idea of a way we could all gather and daydream together. And I'm very excited to share that with you. Moving ahead, I'd really love to continue this journey with you as a weekly podcast. But also, here's what I propose of how we can all daydream together, create community, and just kind of explore the question of like, what if I started structured daydreaming for 40 minutes a week? Like, what might that do for my creative life? How might that change my approach to creative work? Okay, so I propose that we meet once a week, every Saturday at noon Eastern time. That would be 9 a.m. Pacific time. And I think if you're in the UK, that'd be about like 7 your time. Oh, no, I'm not quite sure. Okay. Well, you can do the math. Sorry, I'm such an American. But I propose we call this group the Structured Daydreamers group. Like a writer's group, except better, because it's just like, it's less pressure and it's more meaningful and spiritual and it's going to be great. And I can't wait to learn with you. And I'm thinking the structure of it could be like we gather on Zoom. I'll put up a Zoom link. We all log on. The first 20 minutes, we're just kind of like setting the scene for daydreaming. And I might like teach a kind of little like lesson or something that I think is maybe inspiring or something to journal about. And we just kind of do different things. And then the last 40 minutes of our hour, we all spend it working on our own stuff. And we're all just there together. And maybe I can like kind of share a little bit about what I'm doing that's helping me as I work on my Jesus script. And we can just do it together. This is for you. Come on over. Even if you're like, I don't know if I want to write a script. I don't even know what a screenwriting is. Like, just come hang out. It'll be a great energy and great vibe, and I can't wait to see you there. Our first day doing it will be January 13th. Will be our first time gathering. Okay, and real quick, I wanted to also let anyone interested in really exploring what a screenwriting career might look like for them. For those people, I want you to know that I am offering a one-on-one coaching, like 3 to 6 month package. And this is designed for people who are interested in basically an alternative to a screenwriting MFA program. I got so much out of my MFA program at USC, but I also couldn't help but notice that there was probably a better, kinder, more effective, also much cheaper way to get this level of screenwriting training and mentorship that didn't require like someone moving to LA and having to, pay for an apartment near USC campus and all that jazz. Like we could just take the like most helpful essence of it and make it accessible for a fraction of the cost that a screenwriting MFA at USC goes for. So for those people who like maybe would really love to produce a draft of a script in the next 3 to 6 months, maybe you're someone who applied to an MFA screenwriting program and you're waiting to hear back, because I think they usually share decisions about that like in April or May. And you, at least if you were like I was when I was waiting for my result to see if I got into USC. Basically, what I want you to know is no MFA program has the right to decide if you're a screenwriter or not, or if you should be, quote unquote, a screenwriter or not. And I love helping people just embrace their voice. And I would love to help you feel like you belong in the screenwriting world. But if this interests you, I'd love to chat with you one-on-one. We can do a free initial consult. And so if you're interested in that, you can email me at linda.writing.coach@gmail.com. Or you can also find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is linda.barcy.writes. And I'd also love for you to follow this podcast's Instagram account, which is soulful.screenwriting on Instagram, where you can find just updates about this podcast and also updates about our Structured Daydreamers screenwriting group. Maybe we should just call it the Soulful Screenwriters group. Oh, maybe we should call it that. We can decide as a group later. But let's gather again on Saturday, totally free, every week starting January 13th. I hope to see you there. I'll do reminders on Instagram. And yeah, come hang out. Thank you already for hanging out with me during this time, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or another podcast app. I hope you tune back in. Yeah, and if you know anyone who is like, has maybe whispered to you about like a screenwriting desire or interest, I would love for you to send this to them. And for those of you who are going to go off and like try this daydreaming, maybe this podcast has got you like excited to go for a walk or a drive and just like see what comes up and see what visions, or go watch a fun movie. Oh God, I love seeing movies in movie theaters. There's something about seeing a movie in movie theater that really just gets me like lost in the dream of someone else's cinematic work. So I want to leave you with this little prayer. This non-denominational prayer for any daydreaming session you do. And that's just to begin any daydreaming session with, whatever happens during this daydreaming session is enough. I free myself from expectations of what this set amount of time of daydreaming ought to look like. Yeah, because you can trust yourself. You got this. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so happy to be podcasting again, and I can't wait to hang out with you again soon. Okay, bye.